Welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, the podcast you deserve. My name is Jonathan Astro, and with me is Ricky Allpike. Ricky, how are you?
I'm really good, thanks. It's springtime. Melbourne is finally warm again. Spring's a great time. You know, renewal, transformation.
I can't stand that Melbourne winter, man. I just can't. I was there for 10 years. I can't take it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough. So get this though. You know, this someone legendary followed us, right?
Yeah.
Someone amazing, and I was just like, I'm not going to say. I don't kiss and tell. All right. So don't ask.
People
me.
could find this out on.
Yeah, but
on
don't
Twitter,
don't ask
presumably.
me. Don't ask me. All right. I'm
so
not.
what
I'm
is
not,
this, like a treasure hunt or something?
I'm not a stoolie. I'm not going to sing like a canary. So anyway, the point is, I don't think people can find out. But anyway, someone legendary and like whose work I just think is amazing, right? And it said they follow you, and I was almost did that post where you go, oh, when did this happen? Like that's the Twitter post where you take a screen capture of them following you and you say, when did this happen? And it was amazing. And then I want them to come on the show. You know, I've been biding my time. I've been like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. Go to do it today. Go to their profile. They're not following us.
What happened between then and now?
Gavin.
Oh, I think it was Gavin.
Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah. It's funny, we haven't got as much pushback on Gavin than I thought we would. A lot of people enjoyed the episode.
They did enjoy the episode, and I think, you know, frighteningly, like for these people, for most people, I think they agree with a lot of his ideas. I think they just don't want to say it. Somewhere inside, they're going, yeah, all right. So anyway, it's hit me hard. I'm going through a circuitous route to try and get this person. This is pertaining to today's episode, by the way. We will get to today's episode. We're interviewing Angie Jones today. And Gavin will come up. She's also cancelled. We're going to ask her if she's cancelled, so she can let us know about that. But yes, so anyway, I'm going a circuitous route to try and get this person, and but we'll see. I don't know. Like I think we just got to get used to, you know, not everyone digging it, and people you really respect, like not digging it. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's you. Maybe they're not like you.
Maybe.
Could be. Imagine they said, like, I'll come on the show, but you got to get rid of Ricky.
Well, I guess that'd be less work for me, you know. I could sit back and just listen.
It would. You would have to listen.
I actually wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, I think why should I have to do all the work? I get it. Anyway, all right. I think we should get into this this episode.
Okay, well, we need your help here at The New Flesh. We need you to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to the show. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment about a show you liked or perhaps one that you didn't. Word of mouth is also a very powerful tool, so please tell all of your friends. And finally, to our Uber fans, if you love what we do, you can send us a little cash via the Buy Me a Coffee platform. Any donation here is very much appreciated. And now, let's get down to business. Return guest Angie Jones is a Melbourne-based gender-critical woman who runs the YouTube channel TERF Talk Down Under. Angie is a fierce advocate for women and has outspoken about self-ID, biological men and women's spaces, and the right for females and girls to have sex-separated sports categories. She recently gave a speech in the Federal Parliament on the subject, Why Can't Women Talk About Sex? Angie, welcome back to The New Flesh.
Thank you for having me.
So, Angie, anything happened since we last spoke?
Well, yes. As most people would be aware, I've been defamed by the opposition leader in Victoria, and our wonderful event that we held for Kelly J. Keane, the Let Women Speak event, was hijacked by neo-Nazis, and the Victorian Premier decided to label everyone who attended a Nazi, basically, and say we were hateful and bigoted. And I've been dealing with the consequences of that for the last 6 months.
Thought you were just going to say we had some renos done, but instead that's a lot. We are going to dip into all of those things step by step. But yeah, I must say, I got a funny message from you recently. So we interviewed the infamous Gavin McInnes, and you sent me a message on Twitter, and you said, this is a quote from you, 2 a.m. last night, I have more in common with McInnes than Gillard. Thanks for that. Was this an epiphany you had?
It was a terrifying thought, actually.
Well, Julia Gillard was recently asked the question of the 21st century, which is, what is a woman? Uh, what did you make of her rambling 4-minute response?
I made it. I honestly believe that she's afraid. I think women who are too afraid to answer that question are afraid. They're afraid of public condemnation. They're afraid of being silenced and no platforms. And they're afraid of being attacked and having their loved ones attacked by militant activists.
But she's set up for life, though. That's so weird, though, don't you think? That she's got a stipend. That's what prime ministers get, and really, I mean, so if someone like her is frightened with all of that firepower behind her, I mean, goodness sakes.
That's right, and it's women that have no profile and no platform to lose that have begun to speak up about this stuff, about the way that the very definition of woman is under attack.
Well, it's interesting because you talked about, it being a gotcha moment that gets wheeled out a lot in the UK in their sort of political discourse. And I was thinking about that. I think it's only really a gotcha moment if you can't answer the question. Like if you just straight up say, adult human female, then that's it. The gotcha moment doesn't happen, And I think there's been a number of male figures like Anthony Albanese, he said adult human female and he got away with it scot-free. Do you think there's a different standard for women and men?
I definitely do. I think that women are criticised far more heavily than men. And that is a deliberate thing, because they wouldn't get away with any of this if women weren't complicit. And I also think women are more likely to agree with this agenda that erases us because we've been socially conditioned to.
Well, do you think this question, or I guess some people's inability to answer it, will come to define the 2020s? Do you think we'll look back in amazement at these times?
I think so. I think most people aren't really aware how deep this goes. They think it's just some silly social justice kind of tit for tat that's happening, and they don't realise that people are losing their careers over this, that speaking out on this issue against female erasure is destroying people's livelihoods. It's having them labelled, demonised, having violence incited against them. They just think it's just some funny little political discourse and they don't realise the consequences. And I think when people do, when they realise that it wasn't just a bunch of, crazy feminists having a whinge because the definition of what it is to be a woman has been broadened, when they realise that all of these erasures are taking place and that women have no single-sex spaces anymore, I think they will wake up and say, hey, hang on a minute. But what's that going to take? Like, how long until wider society wakes up to see what's actually happening here and not just laughing at the little gotchas?
Well, this will come up a couple of times. We don't have to make any prognostications just yet, but today I think we'll probably be talking a little bit about where we're at and where we think we're going and where we've come from. But I did read something interesting the other day. It was an article about an internal sort of struggle they're having at The Guardian in how to report on trans issues, which I don't know if this came across your desk at all, but I was just staggered by it seemed as if there's obviously there's a group of gender critical people that at The Guardian, and then there's everyone else who you would imagine saying that trans women are women and whatever. And there's an argument about how to cover these issues. And I just found it so fascinating. I mean, firstly, have you heard about this, or is this the first time you're hearing about it?
My inbox for over 2 years has been full of journalists who I can't name, concerned about what's happening in newsrooms. And it's not just The Guardian, it's The Age, it's even the Herald Sun, it's even Sky News, it's all media platforms, it's television, it's everywhere. And they're all expressing concern about the censorship that's happening in newsrooms on this particular issue.
I just thought it was fascinating because isn't the point of journalism, particularly if it's, there's a lot of opinion out there now, especially on The Guardian, there's a lot of opinion pieces and whatnot. why can't the editorial line simply be bring your best? Both sides. Like, so the person needs to get up and say, both of you bring your best and write your best articles, and then we will let the public, decide on what they feel. But instead, it felt like there was like the gender critical group who they said that there was incredible pressure and activism against them even getting together and having events and talking about this stuff. So it seems like one side feels that they have complete moral authority to shut down discussion, debate, conversation at all.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's top-down decisions. Like, it's editors that are telling journalists what they can and cannot do. And a lot of people come to the gender debate in the middle, where they don't care either way, and it radicalises them because they realise they can't tell the truth.
Do you think this has much to do with like trans rights organisations like ACON? I mean, have they infiltrated all of these places? Is that a factor?
I think that has everything to do with it. I think that there's a lot of money behind the scenes flowing both ways. I think there's lobbyists have been getting positions within governments where they're able to dictate what the media is allowed to report on. I think ultimately there is financial influences that are impacting all of this stuff, but also there's a real push by the government to impose unreasonable things on society and test our compliance, and I think that's part of it as well.
Well, I think we should get into the meat and bones of this thing. Well, firstly, we'll get into the Let Women Speak rally in Melbourne, then we'll get into perhaps what happened after, because we literally spoke to you it felt like in the week before this thing happened, and it just seems like the world sort of exploded straight after that thing, at least in this space. So the first thing, just a tiny little thing. In the articles that talk about, well, the few articles that mention you in this event, you're listed as a co-organizer for the Let Women Speak rally in Melbourne. So what did that mean practically? Did you deal with the cops? Did you do permits? What was your actual role?
Well, I did deal with the cops. I was the police liaison. We were the only one of the 5 or 6 groups that were represented that day that lodged a notification that said we were going to protest on the day, which is almost like a permit. It was a notice of intent to hold an event. We told the cops, how many people we would have attending, what counter protesters we expected, and all of those things. So we had a reasonably good relationship with the cops. I call myself the co-organiser because behind the scenes there were other women involved in organising, but they were anonymous because most of them work in the public service, and to even associate themselves with such an event would mean that they would lose their livelihood. So, because I'm the only one that was public, I kind of copped the heat for everything that happened.
Well, maybe as a bit of a recap, maybe you can run us through the day as you experienced it, a bit of a blow by blow.
Literally blow by blow. We turned up at the steps of Victorian Parliament House to hold a Let Women Speak event in which Kelly J grabs the microphone, gives a little chat, and then offers an open mic to women who attend. And we had a bunch of women come in to speak about how gender identity ideology has impacted on them in their real lives. And that was all very well, but we got there an hour before our event was to start, and trans rights activists were already there, and they were already outnumbering us. Now, they got right in our faces from the get-go. Our marshals hadn't even set up. And we came to blows with them, and the police moved these militant activists over the other side of the busy street. And they were on one side and we were on the steps of Parliament House. But there were other groups that were turning up as well, including the freedom fighters who were mostly anti-lockdown. There were the trans rights activists, there were 2 anti-fascist other groups, 2 socialist groups, and the infamous neo-Nazis that also turned up. So it ended off being a very chaotic day. But the police, we knew we were going to be outnumbered because Melbourne is a very, protesty kind of city. We're an angry, grumpy city. We knew that student unions and people like that had been putting up propaganda around the city saying that they were going to fight Nazis and fight the right-wingers, and that they were actually talking about our peaceful protest, which was mainly left-wing feminist women, but they had already, misled the public into thinking that there were actually going to be Nazis there, but it was actually us women. So all these, social justice activist student types all said, let's go and fight the fash. And even though they were faced with rainbow flags, lots of mums and grandmas and a few men, they still acted as if they were actually facing off against real neo-Nazis.
I'm so glad you said the fash, because we've been talking about. I mentioned to Ricky that you had said this word, the fash, previously, and I was like, that is the coolest way to say like fascist. I'm only ever going to say the fash from now on.
So this is it. I have a history of anti-fascism. I would have been the person on the other side protesting against actual Nazis. And the weirdest irony is that some of the people who are accusing me of being a Nazi actually appeared as witnesses in a court case that I've had ongoing for the last 6 years against a troll who has white supremacist beliefs, who actually asked the very Nazis that invaded our protest to come and bash my disabled brother to find out where I live. So that's the only link I have with Nazis, is that I have had to get an intervention order to prevent Nazis from coming to bash my brother and I.
That sounds awful, Angie. All of that. We'll get into some of that personal stuff, perhaps, but shortly. But just thinking about some of these terms, because this is what we're talking about. This whole Nazi thing got totally blown out of proportion in a way. For starters, the Nazis haven't been around for quite a while, like actual Nazis. I think when we say, oh, the Nazis turned up, you go, well, no, the Nazi party hasn't been around for a while. So it's something else, right? And we're sort of conflating all these terms, and it's being used by various groups to, as you say, to smear you and some of the other people that were there.
And I think it's deliberately confusing. I think that these men in black who supposed neo-Nazis, I think they're an extremist group. Yes, I think they are dangerous, because just like any other cult is dangerous, but to conflate them with actual Nazis who have strong political influence, I think is very, very irresponsible, because it diminishes how awful actual Nazis are.
And these guys were in board shorts and bucket hats.
That's right. That's right. We didn't know who they were. If they hadn't have done the salute, we wouldn't have had any idea who they were.
But also, I struggle to see how there's more than about 25 of these guys in Victoria. It's such a small number of people. It's almost not worth worrying about, to be honest. And
I think they're a bogeyman.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, they are sort of the. I guess they're convenient for some people politically to be able to have a boogeyman to point to, I guess. But one thing that really struck me from being at the rally in Melbourne was that the TRAs on the other side were far more unhinged and terrifying than any of the other groups there. And it's also evidenced by the fact that the cops had to push back pretty hard on them using the mounted police force, and I don't know if the riot squad was there, but there were definitely some pretty heavy looking police guys there, pushing back on them. If you were just dropped in that situation and didn't know what was going on, you'd think they were the bad guys.
Yeah, all the arrests were on their side, and none of the media picked up on that. They said there were 3 arrests at this violent protest, and the 3 arrests were trans rights activists.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
And they were violent and unhinged. I had to go and have EMDR therapy, desensitization therapy, because I kept having flashbacks to this rabid mob of mainly angry men punching police horses to get through a crowd. Now, I've been in those, I've been to plenty of protests. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I've never been affected by that in the way that in that way.
So and as in terms of the talks themselves, so there was because people never talk about this. They never talk about, like, we get caught in the sensational stuff, but really the whole point of the event is that so women can get up and say whatever they say their piece, and can you remember any? I mean, you were, I think, in holding back some people and involved in some of the marshalling and that. But do you remember any of the actual talks that went on that day?
No, I don't. I had to watch it back on the live stream. But I think the biggest injustice of this whole thing is that we had some very powerful speakers speaking honestly and from the heart. And all of the people that criticised our event, none of them actually watched the live stream and listened to the words of those women. It was an event called Let Women Speak, and nobody listened. It broke my heart. Out of everything that happened, all the punches that I took for the team, that's the thing that irritates me the most, because nobody who listened to that live stream could think that we had anything to do with Nazis.
Absolutely. I never saw any of that footage sliced up and put into any news package at all. It sort of just became forbidden footage.
Yeah. And did you see how many photos were in the paper of the actual Nazis, of the other protesters? And there was zero footage of our event. And even now when I see it, like, I have a smile, because I look at it and it looks like possibly a pride event or some other sort of, people meeting in the sun to listen to some speakers. Like, it looks like a positive event. And I think that's the reason why they didn't publish it.
And so, how did the event actually end up? Like, how did it finish up? Because I mean,
Well, we were informed that the police were struggling to hold the line, because after the actual neo-Nazis were let out of the event, the socialist groups had grown in numbers, and the trans rights extremists, and rather than chase off after the neo-Nazis, their anger was directed towards us women. And we were told by the police that it would be a good idea if we hurried up and finished the event for our own safety. So it finished probably 15 minutes early because of the imminent threat.
Perhaps we could talk about maybe the days and weeks after the Let Women rally. I mean, what sort of effects did the rally and I guess the aftermath have on your life?
The thing was, immediately after the event, all I was concerned with was whether Kelly J was pleased with it. And she was, because the speakers themselves were amazing, and we were under-resourced, and with all of the antagonism and all the sort of negative press we were receiving, we actually managed to carry off a really good event. If you just blot out everything else, if you were just there to listen to the speakers. So in the immediate aftermath, it was like, well, who were those black-clad men? Because apparently they were neo-Nazis, but they didn't look like neo-Nazis. So who were they? So that was the first thought. The second thing was that the media started reporting that those men were Nazis and that they were with our rally. And we're like, that's preposterous. It didn't happen. So how could they be reporting this? And there was this real moment. I remember when I saw Daniel Andrews on the television saying that event was hateful and bigoted before the Nazis even turned up, and condemning our event as, right-wing and all those things. And I remember having this moment where I just thought, he's talking about me. He's lying about us. And so from then on, it was almost like we were being gaslit, that everything that was coming out in the media wasn't what actually happened. And we were trying to navigate that with what we knew, not realising that the attention of the entire country was on our tweets, was on any comments that we made publicly. We had no idea that everyone was sort of looking for a gotcha from us. And unfortunately for me, I provided them with one by making one a little bit irresponsible tweet, because I had been attacked for 12 hours on social media as being a Nazi and a white supremacist, which is ridiculous, by people who know I'm not one. And I responded sarcastically with a tweet that, kind of mocked the banner that the Nazis hung down, which said "Destroy pedophiles." So it was an irresponsible tweet on my part. But in the greater context of what I said, it wasn't that horrific. But the media, of course, grabbed that, and the leader of the opposition grabbed that tweet and made it into something that it was not, which is that it was an admission that my personal views aligned with neo-Nazis. So then I started seeing that represented in the media, and of course I was mortified. I'm a mum, I've got small kids. I have a professional reputation to protect, and I could not believe what I was hearing.
Well, perhaps you can maybe you can respond to John Pseudo's comment here. We've got this is from an article that we read. This is from the Victorian Liberal Party leader. He says, quote, "That rally was organised by people who have known and established links with people who have Nazi sympathies, promote white supremacist views and ethno-fascist views. One of the people with whom Miss Deeming was celebrating, in brackets, after the rally was Angie Jones." Close quote. There you are.
Yeah.
So the 20th of March, 2023. So what's up with this?
If he had have clicked on my Twitter profile, he would have seen that none of that was true. If he had have done any other...
It's very lazy.
Yeah, well, he could have Googled my name, and the own ABC back catalogue would have that I am apparently left-wing and vulnerable. So, if he dug a little bit deeper, he could have seen the autism advocacy that I've done, which is recorded in the media. So this was laziness on Mr. Pseudo's part, but it was also laziness and deliberate misleading behaviour from journalists, because they really had no evidence, but they were happy to go along with that narrative.
And I believe you bumped into John Pseudo on the street the other day.
Yes, I did.
How did that go?
That was a bit awkward for Mr. Pseudo. I did confront him and asked him why he hadn't apologised, and he gave a nervous laugh. So it was awkward, but it just proved to me that these politicians and journalists just see me as someone who's inconsequential, like I'm just collateral damage in their quest to discredit Moira Deeming, and that they think that they can treat me like dirt and get away with it. And looking him in the face and him not being able to make eye contact really made me realise how dehumanised I am in their eyes.
Yeah, it really did seem like, this seems really like an internal sort of political matter, but it seemed like you were used in a way, because we've got this Moira Deeming who was part of the Liberal Party, was at the rally and was involved in the rally, and then she's eventually was kicked, sort of suspended out of the party. But it just seemed like Pseudo's millennial and Gen Z staffers just handed him some Wikipedia stuff and whatever, and were like, yeah, just read all this out. And it's so embarrassing, because the Liberal Party, because you already mentioned that Melbourne is, I think you left out the word woke. It's seriously woke. I mean, I don't care what definition of that word you have. Melbourne is that.
Yeah.
And there's just no other way around it. And so the Liberal Party has zero chance in hell of getting in for a very long time. And so they're in such a hole. This guy's gotten the job, and then he's just, happened onto this scandal, and they're just making it up as they go along. So it just became apparent so early that that someone like you was totally being used as a foil here.
I appreciate that, because I've kind of felt a bit invisible in this fight, because both, Kelly J has notoriety, she has a lot of support. Moira, as a politician, has a lot of support and a lot of protection. But I've kind of felt a little bit like, collateral damage and invisible in this. And the impact that this has had on me personally has been invisible. Although, there's a lot of people out there that say, well, you got what you deserved for aligning with Kelly J. Keane, who, even though she may not be a Nazi, is a controversial character. So, and that's from my own side. That's from left-wing women who have gender-critical views who've said that. So, I've copped it from everybody, basically. And I like, it's nice to actually have my role in all of this acknowledged, because I copped the same level of defamation, but the impact on me has been far more personal.
And are you exploring any legal avenues? I mean, are you looking to sue for defamation or anything like that?
I certainly am. And after I confronted Mr. Pizzuto in the street, like, he's had, over 6 months to apologise for what he said about me, and also to condemn the violence. Because for me, what he said wasn't as awful. I mean, what he said is easily disproven. But what he did was, when he called me a neo-Nazi or aligned to neo-Nazis, he incited thousands of people to abuse me, to tell me to kill myself, to say that my children were unsafe with me, that, that I can't walk the streets in my own city without getting a can of soup thrown at my head. And it was all the months and months of that did more harm than his words, because words are easily disproven.
And in terms of, you already sort of mentioned some of the gender critical lefties who jumped off you a bit. Was there any fallout in terms? I mean, did you lose any friends? Did you lose any opportunities as well?
Yes, I did. I think that kind of broke my heart. Like, a Facebook group that I've been involved with since 2014, pretty much is, I'm still in there, but it's made it very difficult for me to participate as part of the group. Other women have actually left because of the injustice of it, the way that I've been treated by women on my own side. So, and I get a lot of criticism because I have been working with people like Maura Deemy and Kath Deves, who are in the Liberal Party. And as a left-wing woman, it's like, oh, well, you're not left anymore. But if I waited for left-wing media to try and clear my name, I would die of old age. And so I will speak out on this issue and the injustice that I've experienced to almost anyone who is willing to listen. And I think I've been quite successful in the last 6 months of using my dodgy Twitter account with my poor grammar and bad spelling to turn around the narrative and prove that I am not aligned with neo-Nazis in any conceivable way.
As a side topic, I've got something I'm dying to ask you about. What did you think of Premier Daniel Andrews hosting a drag queen story hour in Parliament House? Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I think it was despicable. I think it was irresponsible. I think he was sending a very clear message to anyone who dared to speak out against some of the indoctrinations that's happening in schools and kindergartens. I think he sent a very clear message that they would suffer the same fate as we did after Let Women Speak. And, raising the trans flag, it's funny because when he raised the flag a few days after our event, he raised the flag above Parliament House. I had old school Labor mates who I hadn't spoken to for 10 or 20 years, like union blokes, ring me up and go, what the hell? What's the deal with the flag? It was like, that was the moment that they realised that Dan had been bought.
Well, I think it's fascinating that no media outlets really covered this story. I think what Dan Andrews was doing was, this was a response to a drag queen story hour that was happening, I think, at a library in Monash somewhere, at which I think a lot of people came to protest, or at a council meeting about that. And in response to that whole situation, Dan Andrews basically, I guess, tried to rub it in everyone's faces and said, well, let's have a drag queen story hour here in Parliament, and even dragged some kids along for it. I think one of the things that annoys me, I mean, I would be annoyed if a metal band came to play in Parliament House. I'd be annoyed if a hip hop group. I just think that Parliament House deserves a certain level of respect, regardless of what your politics are, and to have what is essentially, adult entertainment, which is now for some bizarre reason being co-opted into children's entertainment. I don't quite understand that, but I just find that whole thing disrespectful.
I agree. And it's a slap in the face for women who find drag offensive as a form of woman face.
Yes, I heard we did an interview with Kit Kowalski. She's spoken at length about a lot of this, but she did a video on her account. She did this wonderful breakdown of a similar drag queen story hour type thing on the ABC, our national broadcaster, and yeah, all of her points were just so spot on. Like stuff that I hadn't even thought about. Like I think maybe people need to bring it to the surface a bit and say, well, what is drag? Where did it start? And you go, look, we're all pretty much left-leaning people in this room right now. We all agree if we go to a drag night or something, it'd probably be a bit of fun. It'd be great. It'd be whatever. It'd probably be at an adult venue like a pub or a nightclub or something, and there would be no children there, and the presenter would be in some kind of dinner dress with a split up the leg, and that's on the lower end. On the higher end, it'd probably have. There'd be fake boobs and a fake vagina or something like that hanging out. And then their name would be some big, like ridiculous innuendo, sexual innuendo.
Yeah.
And as then there's all the stuff you say that you go, well, about it's woman face, and you go, well, how come it's never, and even my description now is going to be a little bit offensive, but how come it's never the demure librarian drag queen? It's never the woman who works at H&R Block. Just who you just go, oh, well, whatever. Like it's always a bombshell, like it's what is it? These are all the questions that I just don't think people are really, really bringing up.
Nobody's allowed to ask any questions. That's it. You can't have it unless you're 100% affirming of any of this stuff. That's it. Any questioning of any of this ideology is met with, well, you're, either a right-wing bigot or you're like ultra-conservative and you're a prude.
Yeah, well, I feel like the tide is turning a little bit, and mainstream outlets are finding their courage a little bit. John, you mentioned that thing at The Guardian, but also recently Channel 7, had their Spotlight show ran an episode all about detransitioners and gender clinics. I feel like people are gaining a bit of courage to speak up. Are you feeling this, Angie? Are you seeing the tide turning just a little bit?
Well, I think all of the tactics that they've tried to shut us up have failed. And the only tactic they have left is to no platform us completely. So the other day, myself and 8 other women spoke at Parliament House to some MPs. And the mainstream media didn't report on it, only The Australian, who is open to talking about gender critical things. So the ABC pretty much ignored it. A couple of little tiny minor regional newspapers picked it up but reported it from the trans rights activist side. So I think there's a doubling down by the governments and the mainstream media to silence and no platform us. So I'm hopeful that more people are speaking up, but I'm not really seeing that amplified out there.
So you recently spoke at the federal parliament. Why don't you tell us in a little bit more detail about the event and what you spoke about and what some of the other women spoke about?
Well, it's really funny because we've copped a bit of criticism because someone snuck photos of inside and there was a lot of empty seats. But the night before, all of the women involved went out for dinner and we had quite a few people there, and none of them could attend our event the next day because they all work in the public service. So it was like the social side of it. The event happened before the event almost. So we all took turns speaking to some MPs, including Jacinta Price, Claire Chandler, Alex Antic, and Senator Babbitt. And there was a little bit of media there. The Australian was there, I think someone from The Age as well. But we basically told our cancellation stories, and that, those of us that are in legal battles, we talked briefly about them and the injustice of it. It was a brief event, quite effective. Afterwards there were discussions about how we move forward to try and get this out into the general public. Because I'm firmly of the opinion that if the public knew what we knew, this ideology would be gone. And the challenge is to force the mainstream media to talk about this stuff.
That's the big thing, isn't it? And we sort of put this to Helen Joyce as well. How do you package some of this stuff up for normies? If you go to some event or whatever, and you manage to, one of your normie friends or family members, how do you package it up so that they don't go, oh geez, so you're off the deep end?
Well, my approach has changed over the years. I used to be so polite. I remember the first time I saw Magdalene Burns being mortified with her plain language and that she didn't use preferred pronouns and that she just men are not women and get men out of women's services. And I used to think, oh, you can't say that. But now I'm just as rude, if not more so. I think the only way you can wake people up is to smack them between the eyes with it and say there are male rapists being sent to female prisons. Children at the age of 15 are having their breasts removed. And the first response is always, no, it's not happening here. No, that's rubbish. That's happening overseas. It's not happening here. And then just providing them with the evidence.
Well, I've had a bit of trouble with some of the boomers in my life. Like, it's so interesting because they are... they're not. They typically haven't been backwards about coming forwards about what they think, and suddenly, the ones that I know are terrified, and they're on the outside of all of these issues. Basically, everything we talk about in this podcast. I've gotten them to listen to some episodes of this podcast, and the responses have been bemused. Like, they're just sort of a bit like, I don't know. They're frightened. It's like the young people in their life. Whether it's their children and their grandchildren or some mixture of that or whatever, and the fact that some of them only watch the ABC, they've just been cowed into this very strange situation where I can tell on the inside that they desperately want to say that some of this stuff is total bullshit, but they're frightened. Have you encountered this or not?
I kind of feel like after COVID and the Melbourne earthquake and all the weird things that happened for that couple of years there, I think as a society we're kind of like a bit desensitized, but we're also on heightened alert. And I think a lot of the time people are kind of dissociating in a way by just nodding their heads with the social justice stuff. It's like a survival mechanism to just go along with the flow. And I think as a society we're doing that because to question it is too painful. Like, if we're paying attention to what they're bringing out about vaccines, for example, which is an argument that I swore I would never weigh into, that there has been actual evidence that they may not have been as effective. Now, for me as a mum who got all of the first 3 vaxes, I think, but also got her young children vaccinated, that's a really awkward space now where those people who I dismissed as crazy cookers might have been right about something. And I think there's a culture of fear, particularly among the middle class, that they've gone along with something and then looked and gone, oh, maybe I wasn't right about it. But all these people over here saying that, I just got to keep going and it'll all just go away. And I think that's what's happening. I think people are just too afraid to say, hey, I made a mistake, because they're afraid of the consequences of that. And also because of cancel culture, because they know that their own side is going to turn on them.
Well, last night, it doesn't even have to be about COVID. Last night, I mentioned something about, we're talking about David Bowie with a bunch of different people. And then a lady whom I quite enjoy, we discussed, I said, oh, I think that, Life on Mars is a good song. I think Sorrow is probably one of my favorites. And then she goes, oh, I like China Girl. And I said, yeah, it's good. And she goes, oh, it's a bit offensive though. And I went, I went, is it? I was like, I mean, I don't know. Like part of, she had to put that forward. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like he's being descriptive. Is it offensive?
So you can't say you just like a song. You have to sort of protect yourself by acknowledging that you see it.
In case I went to the ABC and said, did you know this lady said she thought that Chinese people were the worst? Because she's, that's what she's obviously saying, because she said she liked China Girl. I mean, this is the culture of fear. We've entered into this very strange place.
I don't think people realise, as someone who has, survived being called the worst of the worst, being cancelled might just be the best thing that ever happened to me as far as my voice being heard, because I decided to speak up in this fight because I felt invisible. And I didn't want anyone else to feel the way that I do. And my worst nightmare happened where not only the people in my life who should have spoke up to protect me didn't, but that people, the most powerful men in the state, defamed me, incited violence against me, and yet I'm still here. And I've derived a little bit of comfort from that. And I think that people have to be less afraid of being cancelled. I mean, I wouldn't be here on this podcast if that awful thing hadn't happened to me. So even though the media, the politicians, whatever, are saying these awful things, I know that out there in society, one, I know they're not true, but I know out there there's people who feel the same way I do, who see the injustice. And because we're on the side of the truth, that when those people get together and agree and say this is an injustice, you don't deserve to be cancelled, that we're stronger because we've had that experience. Now, if my adversary, Mr. Pseudo, was to be cancelled, that would mean the loss of his political career. But I have nothing left to lose. He's punched down so hard that there's nowhere else I can go. And so the only way for me is to uncancel myself. And I actually think that that's what's happening. And I think that's what's going to happen for all these other women who've been cancelled and other people like Glenna, for example, Graham Linehan, who just is taking pre-orders for his book that already is going to be a bestseller in a couple of days. You know, he's probably the most cancelled man in Britain. And that gave me a lot of hope.
Well, one other thing that you have that helps strengthen your voice is TERF Talk Down Under, which is your YouTube channel and podcast. How's that show going? Is it growing? Is it getting more listenership?
I'm a bit disappointed with myself because since all of this has happened, my heart hasn't been in it. And the whole reason that I started that channel was to give voiceless women a voice and also to provide comfort to other women that felt excluded socially because of their political opinions. But what's happened is the personal toll of this defamation and the impacts has impacted me to the point where I'm uncomfortable with revealing too much of myself because I know there are people out there who will weaponize the things that I say and use them against me and other people. So while I'm happy to be here talking to you, on my own platform, it's awkward for me because I know that they're out there watching, pulling apart everything I say. And if I accidentally say something, they're going to weaponize it. And I also don't want to accidentally reveal my vulnerability to these people because they are literally, you know, wishing the worst outcomes for me. And I don't want to give them any reason to, you know, attack me. So yeah, I'm like.
So do you like China Girl or do you like China Girl?
Not particularly. And don't get me.
Well, there you go.
Don't get me started on David Bowie and the underage groupies. So.
Oh yeah, I only just found out about this. We talked about this in the recent podcast. Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't know about this, so I got to look into it. You know.
Well, it wouldn't be uncommon for rock stars to, you know.
Well,
Not
like
in
a
that
young-
era anyway.
complicit Ricky Allpike. Yeah. Well, so I just wanted to ask you about the rest of the Let Women Speak tour, particularly New Zealand, because you know, as a reminder to our listeners, Kelly J. Keane went to New Zealand. Tasmania was pretty loose as well here. And she was mobbed by trans rights activists. Let Women Speak marshals and representatives were assaulted. Kelly J herself was doused with a liquid on stage, which turned out to be a juice, but frankly could have been anything. I don't want someone running up to me and just dousing me with something. I'm like, is this acid? So the police watched on pretty much from a safe distance as the crowd stormed the stage area. Kelly J was smuggled out somehow, and she left the country almost immediately. So, firstly, what did you make of these events, and then perhaps some of the fallout of her New Zealand
Well,
leg?
I think what happened to Kelly J in New Zealand was a direct consequence of what happened in Melbourne, that the New Zealand media went along with the narrative of John Pesutto and Daniel Andrews that we were right-wing Nazis, and the media coming up to her event in New Zealand all portrayed her as such. And so a lot of people, as any reasonable person would do, turned up to protest against who they thought were white supremacists, but were actually just women's rights campaigners. And they turned up there, and that's when all the awful things happened. So I definitely think that what happened in Melbourne impacted what happened in New Zealand.
Yes, it sort of felt like that you know, with each event, things were ramping up, because Tasmania was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
In Hobart, like that seemed even more rabid, and then it seemed like the deafening silence from the media and about the whole thing really, but then the sanctioning of each successive sort of line step of people it led up to this moment where they got to New Zealand, and it was a total rabid mob. And I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was totally off the chain. And like the behavior is so plainly disgusting. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of, I don't understand, like even if it was my movement, I'd be so disappointed. I'd be like, oh, like it's like, you'd just be like, why we let the psychos in our team take over? Like why do we have to be okay with the people pushing down the barriers, punching old ladies, and dousing people, and just I mean, it's complete opposite of reasoned rational debate or Gandhi-like protest.
But you've got to ask yourself the same question about why the police chose to let the neo-Nazis behind the line at our event when faced with the socialists getting behind the line. So they chose to let the despicable neo-Nazis behind the line because they thought the women would be safer. And so, they keep hiding from the public what a violent, aggressive mob of people these trans rights extremists are.
But they don't even mention the fringe element. Like even if you are completely sympathetic to the trans rights activist side, just a slight mention of some of the loose units you see there would actually strengthen your argument. So if you were like, you know what, trans women are women, but this person and that person, they are clearly not doing the right thing, and we should call out.
I put the blame for that at the hands of activist editors, because we know that journalists try and be objective, but what happens is a journalist will come to the newsroom with an adequate, like a response that portrays both sides, and the editors will say, no, you can't say that, and they'll twist it to make the trans rights extremists look like the good guys. And I've had numerous reports from journalists that they've tried to actually tell the truth, and the younger, often male editors have said to these older journalists, no, we can't say that. And so what happens is, women particularly, but men and women in their 60s who've been journalists for decades are being told by young editors in their 30s what they're allowed to publish. And if they don't do what they're told, they'll lose their job.
We'll be covering this with Julie Sago, who actually got 86th from The Age for this very reason.
I'm going to ask you to get your crystal ball out here. Where will we be in 1 year's time on women's issues?
Well, I'd like to think that we will have moved forward, that the public will be more aware of the impact that gender ideology is having on female-only spaces, services and sports. But I'm a little bit discouraged at the moment. Although more people are speaking up, the media is doubling down. I'm hoping that the legal actions that are taking place all over the country now are going to make a difference, that we're coming together and we're creating a pool of resources where women who are having their employment terminated or suspended, or women who are being taken to human rights tribunals, that they can defend themselves as long as they need to. We all know about the Tickle versus Giggle case, where Sal personally has to raise $1 million to see it to its fruition. But, we've got to get behind these women who are willing to defend our rights. And we're going to have to do it through the courts, I'm afraid, because the media won't tell the truth. And hopefully, my biggest fear is that something like Tickle versus Giggle will happen, which is huge because it affects, the legal definition of a woman, in the sense that, we find out for sure whether gender identity trumps sex in the Sex Discrimination Act. So my biggest fear is that the media just won't report on it. So the general public won't know, because that's what's happened to this point, that the public's being misled. And I really worry that this will continue. But I think because of what's happening in the UK, and because Kelly J is kind of forcing people to shine a light on it, and even the legal action of Moira Deeming, there are these little cracks starting to appear in the foundations of gender ideology. I'm hopeful that we will make enough noise that the thing starts to crumble. And, there's such misinformation out there that we want to erase trans people, or that we want to cause some sort of genocide. But nobody in this movement has a problem with gender non-conforming men. We just don't want them in the very, very few spaces that are female only. And we don't want to compete against them in sport because of the obvious unfairness. And we don't want them to take all the women's roles, because women are already at a disadvantage in many ways. So, we don't have a problem with the whole concept of trans. And up until recently, even I would use preferred pronouns. But what's happened now is it's gone way, way, way too far. And all we want is to just pull it back a bit so that women still have their rights, children aren't being groomed, and that people aren't being misled.
So, Angie, we want to give you the final word. This just occurred to me because now, Ricky, you can cut this out if you like, but Ricky's wife mentioned that they're now at her workplace, they're being forced to put their pronouns on their email signature. Now, I'm just saying, as a small gesture, do you think that because a lot of women, a lot of normal, just average women listen to this podcast, even Gavin McInnes, and I know you're out there, not telling anyone, no comments on Twitter, and so I wonder, do you think these small gestures of just saying, look, I respect, your someone's opinion about this stuff, but I'm just not going to do it. Do you think that these small things could end up having a big effect?
Yeah, for sure.
On?
I think non-compliance is the only way. I will not use wrong sex pronouns. I met a trans-identified person the other day, and I said to them straight up, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to misgender you. And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. Because if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And us just being nice and accommodating is what's put us in this mess. And we have to be hardline, but we can do it in a way that doesn't seem hardline, just by saying a quiet, look, no, I'm not comfortable with that, or no, I don't believe in that, or no, I don't think that's fair. And they're all reasonable things to say. Not that you should even need to qualify it. No should be enough. Just say no. And I think that's the only way.
Yeah, well, I'll see which way my wife's going to go. I'm pretty sure she's not going to do the pronoun thing. She's not a fan, but I'll keep you updated.
Good luck.
So, Angie, we do have a final question that we ask all of our guests, and we'd like to know what you're reading right now.
I'm reading the Anti-Fascist Handbook.
Anti-Fascist Handbook. Is this?
It's next to my bed, so it's in the other room. Do you want me to go see?
No. I'll look it up. Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, author Mark Bray. Okay. And is this good?
I'm reading it because I'm trying to remember the mindset of someone who considers themselves an anti-fascist. I'm trying to get into the mindset of someone who can go along with the government, ideologues, the corporates, and still consider themselves an outlier. I'm just trying to, get in my head how they can possibly think that way.
That's such a good point. We've a lot of these ideas in the cultural aspect of the hard left have become complete orthodoxy at the ABC, in government, and Qantas and whatever. So you could walk into a meeting at Qantas and say some pretty fringe stuff and get away with it. You know what I mean? So I too am fascinated. It sounds like a fantastic book. I should probably check it out. I'm absolutely fascinated by, as you say, how you can be accepted. You could get grants funded, like Australia Council. You could get a big show. Ricky, you could write an opera, like just the most mad fringe opera about some anti-fascist thing or some trans thing, and totally get the money, even if you hadn't done one jot on it, and yet still think on some level you're like, oh, geez, it's so hard being just on the outside of things, like, oh, it's so hard.
The problem with that is, though, I am a cisgendered white man, heterosexual cisgendered white man.
Like
so that's the problem. If I identified as queer or Indigenous, then that money would be sewn up for sure.
Probably. But anyway, I say get writing. In the meantime, I think we'll check out this book, Angie. Great recommendation. Thank you. And now, how can people find you online? How do they track you down? The nice people, not the trolls.
Oh, look, trolls are welcome too. I'll just argue with them or block them. On my, I was going to say Twitter. It's Angie Jones, ANGIJONES on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel, TERF Talk Down Under, which is on YouTube. And apart from that, I'm around.
Thanks so much, Angie. Angie, we'll catch up with you again, and I'm sure your uncancellation will be successful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the New Flesh podcast. If you like our work, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or even writing us a review. It really does help the show reach a wider audience. We'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, long live the New Flesh.